Hello, Out Entrepreneurs. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to episode number 25 of the Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On today's show, I am so happy to host a fellow podcaster, coach, author, and all-around entrepreneur, Ricklemons. So Rick, are you ready to inspire fellow out bosses?
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm really thrilled to have you here. Just a little more background about Rick. He is the author of Frankly, My Dear, I'm Gay, host of the Coming Out Lounge podcast, certified life coach, TEDx speaker, world record holder, which I'm really curious about that, and a guy who's helped thousands of people in over 50 countries across the globe come out of the closets of their lives to escape their BS, explore their fears, and elevate their authentic self-expression. And Rick's signature mantra is make your quirk work, whatever that beautiful quirk is. And since the show is all about inspiring the next generation of out bosses, I couldn't think of a more motivational guest to have on the show. So Rick, thank you again for being here. And to kick off the interview, could you tell us just a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Sure. So this came out of my own coming out journey, actually, that I found myself suddenly staring at, do I want to keep doing corporate branding work? Do I want to run a marketing branding consulting firm, which was what I was doing once I got laid off from my big gigs? And then suddenly I had a whole bunch of life coaches as clients, and simultaneously I was surrounded by a whole lot of other guys who had come out of the closet late in life. And it seemed like I was answering questions right and left about, well, how do you do this? And what do you do, as you start to enter gay culture, and how do you be a father and all this sort of stuff. And it just, the light bulb hit one day, and I'm like, okay, I'm really enjoying doing this with these guys, but I'm really tired of sitting and drinking cocktails and giving all this advice. I'd rather be trying to figure out how I can do something and really have impact. And before I knew it, I started looking at coaching and being a therapist. And I thought, well, therapy ain't for me because I just don't want to invest 3 years of my life trying to get certified and all this stuff and going to school. So yeah, I was a little bit lazy. I chose coaching, and it's been just a fantastic ride ever since. And coaching led me to podcasting, and it led me to writing my first book and then becoming a blogger. And simultaneously, about the time I started blogging, I had an opportunity to start doing some speaking through PFLAG, and have been speaking with PFLAG probably for about 4 years as of now. And that led me to doing some other speaking work. And so now that's my world. I speak, I write, I blog, I podcast, and I coach. And I feel really blessed because it's not just about LGBTQ work at this point. It is about really, truly helping people move from a space of really in their black and white thinking to a space where they move beyond that to make really big, bold moves in their life. And what I do is basically help them get there. But as I do it, I really parallel the coming out journey into anybody's life that all of us who are LGBTQ have felt, and parallel a lot of the experiences and the things that help people come out to be who they really want to be. And I do it for really anyone and organizations and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the coming out process is so transformative. And I think for anyone going through a life transition, all of the skills that you have as this amazing life coach can absolutely be applied in so many different situations. And I think that is incredible. You saw a lot of your skills align, the stars align for you to create this business, and you're doing a ton of really amazing things. Of all of the things, what's kind of the one thing right now that has you most inspired about your business today?
Well, ironically, it really is the podcasting that kind of has everything growing rapidly. It's actually the reason that we're in a brand transition right now. I had started working on boosting my podcast numbers and really looking at, okay, where are we, where can we get more downloads? But simultaneously, this whole new idea, but this just isn't about the LGBTQ coming out story, was also percolating underneath. And in the midst of starting to build the podcast and trying to get more numbers and stuff, my mentor that I'm working with, he goes, well, let's look at your real brand. And then when we started looking at that, I had hired somebody else to work with me on some speaking stuff. And then a good girlfriend of mine that I mastermind with became part of this whole transformation. And we have now landed on a brand that we're in the midst of launch called Life Uncloseted, which is the overarching look at what are all the closets that people come out of. So the podcast really is what started it all, but now we're in a huge brand that everything is moving that direction. I just had some big meetings with my speaking mentor yesterday, and we landed on some pretty cool concepts around speaking and what that looks like when I'm out there pitching. So I guess the two highest things would be speaking and podcasting right now, but I've also got a full slate of clients. So I've kind of got the best of all worlds right now.
Yeah, spread more of that. Rising tide raises all ships.
Exactly.
And podcasting is so much fun. So really thrilled that you're putting out your podcast there. So if you could take us back, you had talked about you had another life, another career in corporate branding. And what was that moment for you, the light bulb moment that made you take that entrepreneurial leap? And usually when I'm talking with guests, there's kind of one of two reasons why they started their business. The first is that they definitely felt a calling to pursue a purpose-driven idea.
Right.
And for a large number of other folks, it's just that they can no longer really conform to a workplace culture that didn't value who they were. And I'm just curious, which of these two motivators really resonated more for you and why?
Well, the irony is it was my own coming out that caused everything to change. I was really high up the ladder in a software organization as a branding VP and traveling the world, jet setting, all that good stuff. And in the tail end of that career is when I finally came out of the closet. And simultaneously, as you're coming out, in my situation, coming out, going through a divorce, have two young kids, lots of worlds were colliding. And I actually made a career change in the midst of that, went to another tech company, hated it, went back to my original company, and I realized I really hated that too. And then simultaneously, the writing was on the walls that we were about to get sold. So I got a nice little golden parachute and left. Took a year off, started to really discover myself right in the time frame that, I was going through the divorce and everything. Took a job in a .com that was just a startup. I was third employee on the team and helped grow them to profitability in about 5 years. Nice little small, company. And came back and got laid off again. And that was when I had a real, what I call my own come to Jesus talk with myself. And I said, I'm done. I am done building other people's businesses only to be the guy that gets let go. And in the second case, I was literally told, hey, we love you. You do great stuff. We love everything you've done. And remember, I was the third employee hired, but we know you'll be okay. So that's why we're letting you go. And I thought, I don't want to hear those words ever again. If I'm going to be okay, then I'm going to be the one that goes and builds whatever it is that I want to build for myself. And that was really the pivotal moment. And that was 2006. And so here we are, 2017, and I'm still going strong.
I like what you said where you were done building other people's businesses. I've heard sometimes people talking about being an employee and building out someone else's dreams. Yep. And really kind of shifting that frame, and that's like a huge transition of your own where it's just like you had this epiphany where it's like, you can do this for yourself. You have all these skills. And I think that that's something for listeners of this program. It's a lot of folks just thinking about taking that first step towards building their own businesses and chasing their own dreams. And so hopefully that really resonates with people listening right now. It certainly does for me. So you also,
well, and there's another thing, Rhodes, that I want to say about that is, and again, so here comes the coming out coach really starting to talk his talk here. But I think for all of us, what we don't realize is when we're holding back from whatever it is, it doesn't matter what is holding you back. You're still in a closet. You are in a closet of whatever that is for you in your life. And those of us that are LGBTQ, we get the closet metaphor probably better than anybody. What we should also understand is we're the most familiar of how we stay in those closets and how we get out of those closets. And I'm going to just throw this out to everybody. You already have everything in your closet to help you get out.
Yeah.
There's nothing you really have to go do again. If you've come out of the closet into your sexual orientation or your gender identity, you've got all the tools to come out of your closet to go build a business. You've got all the tools to come out of your closet to go after that promotion. You've got all the tools to go after a relationship that really counts for you. And we tend to forget that. The most powerful thing I realized, and it's only been the last 6 months as I've really been doing a deep dive into how am I going to go take this thing to a wider audience? How am I going to go build this thing? Was when I landed on that concept of everything you need is in your closet to get you out of that closet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to go learn some new things, but don't go reinvent the wheel. Whatever you've done to successfully come out, you can do it again in a career change, in a relationship, in a building a business. You're going to go learn some new things, but don't forsake the things you already know how to do.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And you're right. One of the hardest things for LGBT folks is just coming out to yourself, coming out to those closest to you. And you, by virtue of doing that, you do have those skills that are just, I mean, anything else in life. You know, I think for myself of just transitioning where it's like, I transitioned, you know, like there's other things that are much easier than that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially like in the context of business building. So I think that's great advice. So thank you for sharing that. And something else that you said that I thought was interesting in common for people is just that you had mentioned a number of different companies where you had said that you hated them, you know, a number of tech companies. And I'm assuming that you're talking about a number of things, but culture is a big piece of that, you know, workplace culture. And I'm curious right now in your business, you know, what's one thing that you do to create, you know, a more inclusive environment for those that you work with? So it could be your staff, it could be subcontractors, whoever, but especially for folks who often feel excluded by dominant workplace culture.
So I don't have a lot of staff. I actually have anywhere from 1 to 3 people working with me at any given time. One for sure, which is my podcast producer. And before I ever even hired him, I said, you know, I want you to know that, first of all, I've heard great things about you. And I really want to work with you, but I want to make sure you want to work with me too. So I'm going to be really transparent. I'm gay. You know that. You know what the podcast is about. You know, it's about coming out stories. And I'm pretty brash. I mean, there's going to be F-bombs and I'm going to talk about stuff and I'm going to go places. And that's why I have an explicit rating on my podcast, because I will talk about things that need to be talked about. And as much as I want to work with you, I don't want to make you or any of your staff that may be doing the editing feel uncomfortable, nor do I want to put you in a place that pushes up against some particular value you may hold. So rather than us getting into this and then deciding this doesn't work, I believe in being transparent right from the start, and I want to make sure you're in the same space. And that was one of the best things I ever did, because first of all, I knew there probably wasn't an issue, but I gave that person the opportunity right then and there to say, you know what? Yeah, we're not a fit. And because I made the move first, which I've gotten used to doing this, even when my kids were very young when I came out. So even as they started to go through school, I would go to the teachers at back to school night and say, you know what? I need to have a private conversation with you. Here's the deal. And this may not align with your personal values, but I feel that I owe it to you to know that my children have a gay father and I'm in a gay relationship with another man, that we consider ourselves parents. And I'm sharing this with you only because I think I owe it to you, so that if you have any issues or anything comes up, you know where to go to have conversations. And I see my relationships in my business the same way. Put it all out there up front, and you can either nip it in the bud right then and there, or at least you know where you stand.
Yeah, and you're speaking directly to your culture, to
Mm-hmm.
be direct, to work with people that want to be there with you and really believe in your dream, you know, in your business. And I think that is great advice as well for people just starting to build their businesses, as they think about all of their revenue and profit streams, all of that good stuff, is also just kind of thinking about how you're taking care of yourself so you can be yourself, but also your people, and making sure that the right people are surrounding you. So I think that's great advice.
And, you know, Rhodes, the other thing too that you just brought up that I think is important to say is, one of the greatest things that, again, I think we as LGBTQ individuals have learned is the value of being true to ourselves. What I see a lot of people in the business world do is they forsake that. Mm-hmm. They have a great concept for a business. They have ideas of what they want to do. They have beautiful vision. They want to impact the world in absolutely fantastic ways, or bring a product to market. And then somewhere along the way, they forsake themselves. And then they wonder why they're not being successful. And to me, whatever your values are that you hold dearest, you need to constantly be keeping those in check with who you're being as a person in your career, in your business world. Because when you get unhappy when it gets tough, especially when you're an entrepreneur, when it gets really tough, you need to check in and go, okay, is this tough because it's just new, or is it tough because I'm out of alignment with my own personal core values? If I had forsaken my values when I was in the closet and stayed in the closet, I was miserable. Look at it now and ask yourself those same questions when you're having trouble in your business.
And be clear from the beginning what your values are, and just pin it up in front of your desk or wherever you spend the most of your time, just so you can return to that. And great advice. I feel like I'm getting free coaching right now, so thank you. So switching gears a bit, you've already talked a lot about your identity and how that influences your business. One thing that I like to have my guests do is just to share a moment where it might have been difficult for you to be an out boss. And I know that you are 100% out and super direct, but I'm just curious, because you do have these direct conversations, not only with your staff, but I would imagine with clients, was there ever a moment where, depending on a consulting gig that you may have had or a speaking gig, where talking directly about your sexual orientation, you thought that could compromise a project, where it might have resulted in potentially losing that client? Is there something that comes to mind? And if so, can you share that? Do you feel comfortable sharing it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I definitely think it will help guests who are afraid just to kind of be 100% out all the time.
All right. Well, the second gig that I moved on to after my big corporate position with the software company was the .com. We developed online reservations and web presences for the outdoor recreation industry, specifically the RV park and campground industry. And very mom and pop kind of industry, a few corporations in there, some of the biggies like KOAs and, Yogi and stuff like that. But for most of them, very mom and pop, single sole proprietor sort of businesses. And here I come from, big software international company into the environment where I was very comfortable being out because I was working in the hotel industry, and being out in the hotel industry is like, a lot of people are out, right? And as I got into the new industry, I realized how homophobic it was. If not spoken homophobic, under the covers homophobic. And I went to my owners and I said, you know what? You guys know who I am. They knew who I was in the interview. I mean, I didn't beat around the bush. I said, so I don't want to cost us anything, as a company, but I'm not going to hide who I am, because one of the things about the campground and RV park industry is it's very family oriented too. So when you're sitting there at a campground talking to them about what you can do or how our system could really help enhance their revenues, it was not uncommon for them to say, so do you and your family ever camp or go RVing and so on and so forth? And I said, I'm not going to hide who I am. But what I also realized is I didn't have to make a big deal out of it. So I'm going to go back to kind of the way I was with my kids in school around school stuff. When I would be in a social environment at my children's elementary school and middle schools, if somebody made a comment about, what did you and your wife do this weekend? I would say, well, me and my husband did this. And I just kind of let it go. And so I found that's where, again, I learned the beauty of don't reinvent the wheel. However you've been showing up, continue to show up. And I remember the first few times I did that with some campground owners, I was a little bit nervous. But then what I forgot, which I should have remembered from my own coming out journey, is don't assume that somebody's not going to accept you. And over the years, even to the point at the National RV Park and Campground meeting, we sponsored one of the big receptions, and I actually showed up in drag at that reception, being like this hokey campground mistress, so to speak. And the whole place loved it.
That's awesome.
Because I was just showing them, not really, it was hokey drag. I mean, it was really bad. I still had my beard and everything. But it showed that this was a fun thing. I know there were people who got a little bit, uncomfortable at that. But for the most part, because I just showed up being Rick, which they all knew, it actually went pretty well. And I guess, so my point to this would be, show up as yourself, but don't make it the priority of who you are in these environments. You're there to do business. You're there to do. Now, if you're doing diversity and inclusion stuff, that's a whole different kind of conversation. But just keep it as lighthearted and normalize it as much as you can. We all have our lives that we live. And I know every time that I say, yeah, my husband and I did this, or, our family trip, we all went there and it was my husband and I and our two daughters. It actually, sometimes it takes people by surprise, but then they just keep having the conversation. It's like, oh, this is kind of normal. They're a normal family.
Yeah.
And we just keep moving on.
Yeah. I mean, it's this, like you said, it's being consistent in who you are. And it's almost as if it's a learning moment for people if they're assuming who your spouse is and they wrongly assume that you have a wife.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of the subtle kind of redirecting of like, actually, my husband and I went away the weekend, this past weekend, and went camping and just without apology, and without an explanation. Right. And I think that in and of itself just normalizes the fact that there are same-sex headed households everywhere where people are mm-hmm. married, and it it allows people to reconsider the next time they assume
absolutely
the sex of someone's partner. So I think that's great and super, super helpful. Before we go to a really quick sponsorship break, I wanted to ask you just to hone in on one thing that you want our listeners to consider to make sure that they're inspired to be their authentic selves at work or as they build their business. So you've shared a lot of really great guidance and advice, but what's that one thing that you would want listeners to take away from this particular interview of just kind of saying, I am going to be consistent and I am going to be myself no matter what, and just normalize who I am to those that I work with?
Well, I think the consistency is, and again, I'm going to invite everybody who's listening, if no matter where you are in your coming out journey, is to remember our coming out isn't black and white. It isn't a yes or no. It may seem like it's a yes or no, but to get to the, okay, yes, I'm going to say I'm gay or lesbian or bi or trans, there was a whole lot of what people would call the gray area, which I like to call the colorful spectrum of possibilities of why we finally step out to be who we are. And the more that and what I pride myself on is helping people step away from black and white thinking so that they can see the colorful spectrum of possibilities, so that then they can make the big, bold move that works for them and do it their way. And I think too often we get caught in black and white thinking and we forget there's this beautiful spectrum between yes and no, or can or can't I, or should I, shouldn't I, that when we get stuck there, we don't get anything done. But when we stop and go, okay, but what are all the other colorful possibilities? That's when we make things happen. It isn't in the black and white. It's in the color in between.
We are definitely not robots. There's not zeros and ones. There's a lot of complexity with being human. And I think it's fantastic advice. So Rick, thank you for sharing so much. We're going to take a quick sponsorship break right now. And for our listeners, please stick around because when we return, we're going to learn more about Rick and his business.
HR and diversity professionals. Are you struggling with engaging LGBTQ talent? Do you stay awake at night worrying about limiting litigation risks? Have you considered seeking support around these concerns, but just aren't sure where to turn? Look no further. Rhodes Perry Consulting offers you solutions with the Engaging LGBTQ Talent A to Z certification. This proven 4-week mentorship program delivers skills, offers support, and connects you with other professionals committed to transforming themselves and their workplaces. Learn more about this cutting-edge program by visiting rhodesperry.com and use the promo code RPC for a 10% discount. Take action and visit rhodesperry.com.
So welcome back, Outbosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Rick just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn how to stay in touch with Rick after today's conversation. So Rick, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Absolutely. These are my favorite things to do. So let's do it.
I know you're going to rock this. So did your LGBTQ identity hold you back from taking the entrepreneurial leap, or did it speed up the process for you?
It absolutely sped up the process. It was the thing, like, if I can come out of the closet, I can do this.
I mean, you live that in your business 100%. So in one sentence, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
For me, it means having the courage and the confidence and the true commitment to just be my transparent self each and every day.
And what's one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
You probably heard this many times over, but truly my meditation practice is just, I couldn't live without it. 3 times a day.
3 times. Whoa. I'm just kind of blown away by that. I try to do it once a day.
I do 20 minutes in the morning. I do 20 minutes right before I go to bed. And then sometime in the middle of the day, I find 10 minutes to just kind of like, okay, let's pop I actually have a really cool thing called Muse that I use, which is a brainwave sensing sort of thing. And pop my little Muse on, and for 5-10 minutes, the middle of the day, it depends on how much time I got, but I try to get 5-10 minutes in the middle of the day.
There's so many guests that particular question, meditation, comes up consistently. So there's something magical to that.
The other thing is that I don't take myself too seriously.
Yeah, you got to have a good sense of humor because especially in the world of entrepreneurship. So name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
On my podcast, I show up, I record, and I hand everything off to my team.
Amen. That saves hours and hours of time.
Absolutely.
Okay, 2 more questions for you. So please share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap.
Just don't wait too long. And I guess I say that because I waited so long to come out of the closet, yet I know it was the right time for me to do it. But then once I came out, I'm like, man, everything else is about coming out too. And so trust your instincts. I truly trust my gut instincts more than anything else in my business. And when you feel like, okay, it's time, then that is when it's time. Don't second guess it. Just follow that instinct.
Trust your instincts and know that the time is right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rick, thank you again for your time and for inspiring fellow outbosses. Before we go, can you share just one way to stay in touch with you and to learn more about your business?
Absolutely. The best way is Ricklemons, CLEMONS.com. That's my primary website, and it'll link off to my podcasts and all that other stuff. But that's the best way to stay in touch with me.
All right, so ricklemons.com, and that will be included in the show notes for everyone. So outbosses, thank you again for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Rick. As a next step, check out the show notes for highlights from today's conversation, subscribe to the podcast, and consider leaving your honest feedback. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.